Good morning, everybody. Give me just a second. Let me make sure that I got my sound right. Make sure that I got the visual good. And then we're gonna get right off into this video. I got a good one for y'all today. To everybody that be following the channel, I want to apologize first because I know it's been a while since I tapped in with you guys. I apologize for that. Been a little busy at work, been a little busy at home, but we back. We back. We back like we never left. Y'all see the title, so y'all can already get a taste of what we're gonna be getting into. We're gonna be doing the same thing that we do all the time. We're gonna be allowing the ancestors to speak. We're gonna be looking at a little bit of history, and we're gonna be doing a little bit of teaching. We're gonna be breaking this thing down like it has never, ever been broken down before. Let me get this PowerPoint going. Give me just a second. Let me get this PowerPoint going. And then we're going to get off into it. But y'all see the title. Today, we're going to be talking about the escape of Adah Isabelle Suggs. The escape of Adah Isabelle Suggs. Now, a lot of us, when we talk about individuals, our ancestors escaping from slavery, one of the first things that we think about is the Underground Railroad. That's why our minds go first, and as well it should. The Underground Railroad was one of the primary methods by which our ancestors were able to acquire their freedom during our enslavement on these shores. So it's always good to have your mind think about the Underground Railroad, but the usage of the Underground Railroad is not the only method in which our people used to get free. Sometimes they were able to escape to the north, to the free states, and sometimes they were able to escape as far away as Canada on their own. And when I say on their own, I'm not saying without the help of others, but without the help of the specific mechanism that we know of today as the Underground Railroad. And indeed, some of our ancestors, they even escaped to freedom in Mexico. Now, the individual ancestor that we're going to be looking at today, her story is unique. And why I say her story is unique is because she escaped at a point in history when a lot of documentation and records were being kept. Documentation and records that we are going to be able to dig up and uncover. I'm going to be showing you guys some things that you've probably never seen associated with one of our ancestors who escaped to freedom. So this is going to be a really interesting story. So what we're going to do, we're going to get right off into it. This is going to be coming from the Indiana slave narratives, the oral histories of our ancestors, um, the oral history of our ancestors who were interviewed in the state of Indiana. We're going to be looking at this, and again, I'm going to be breaking this thing down step by step, how I like to do, showing you guys where she was from, showing you guys her parents, her children, her husband, and how she escaped, where did she go, and we're gonna be having fun with this one. So the escape of Adah Isabelle Suggs, and the primary source that we're going to be looking at is the Indiana slave narratives. So let's get into the actual story itself, and I'm going to be showing you guys information so that you can follow this story from beginning to end. Okay, so according to the oral histories, according to the slave narratives, the story begins. Among the interesting stories connected with former slaves, one of the most outstanding ones is the life story of Adah Isabelle Suggs. Indeed, her escape from slavery, planned and executed by her anxious mother, Harriet McLean, bears the earmarks of fiction, but the truth of all related occurrences has been established by the aged Negro woman and her daughter, Miss Harriet Holloway, both citizens of Evansville, Indiana. So right off the bat, we're seeing that we're getting this documentation directly from the source, the woman, ancestor Adah, who escaped, and her daughter, Harriet Holloway, who was named after ancestor Adah's mother, Harriet McLean. So the story begins. Born in slavery before January the 22nd, 1852, the child, Adah McLean, and was the property of Colonel Jackson McLean and Louisa, his wife. According to the customary practice of raising slave children, Adah was left at the Negro quarters of the McLean Plantation, a large estate located in Henderson County, 3.5 miles from the village of Henderson, Kentucky. There, she was cared for by her mother. She retains many impressions gained in early childhood of the slave quarters. She remembers the slaves singing and dancing together after the day of toil. Their voices were strong and their songs were sweet. Master was good to his slaves and never beat them, were her words concerning her master. So, first and foremost, we see that this particular ancestor was enslaved in the state of Kentucky in a place called Henderson County. So before we go on with the story, I want to show you guys something. Okay, so this is a map that I pulled up, just so you guys can follow. Now, every state during this time in 1852, every state that was a part of the United States was not a slave holding state. Okay, we got to understand that everybody wasn't pro-slavery in America, and this is why a lot of our ancestors were able to escape to the north, because a lot of the northern states were free states, and our ancestors were they weren't treated how the white population was treated, but they weren't enslaved. Their condition was 1,000 times better than the conditions of our ancestors in the South. So what I have here is a map on the screen, a map of the state of Kentucky. If you're not sure what the state of Kentucky is at, and I have a another map of the state of Kentucky, and in red, you can see where Henderson County is located. So Henderson County is located right on the northern border of the state of Kentucky. It actually borders the Ohio River. And this is going to come up later in the story, because we're going to see how our ancestor was able to cross the Ohio River into the state of Ohio, which subsequently at that time was a free state. They did not promote slavery in Ohio, and so we're going to be able to see that a short distance, literally a few miles apart, separated our ancestors from enslavement and freedom. But it was still very difficult to make it from that condition of slavery to that condition of freedom. We have a comment in the comment section. Yaya Kids says, salute to the ancestors for wisdom, knowledge, love, and guidance. Salute, Yaya Kids. Good to see you. Good to see you in the building. It's been a minute since I posted. Been busy with life, but we're back. So when you pull up Henderson County, Kentucky on Wikipedia, we're just going to get a basic overview of where our ancestor was enslaved at. It says Henderson County is a county in the United States in the U.S. state of Kentucky. The county is located in western Kentucky on the Ohio River, across from Evansville, Indiana. Remember that, Evansville, Indiana. Ironically, that's where our ancestor escaped to. As of the 2020 census, the population was 44,793. Its county seat is Henderson. The county was formed in 1798 and named for Richard Henderson, who purchased 17 million acres of land from the Cherokee, part of which would later make up the county. Now, just off the bat, there had to have been something illicit going on. It's no way you're going to make a legitimate purchase of 17 million acres of land from the Cherokee Indians. When we know that they were taking land, they were forcing Indians off of their ancestral land, they were killing them, there were Indian wars going on. And you're not going to make me believe that you made a legitimate purchase for 17 million acres of land. Like, what did you even give them? It's not like they were uh, uh, um, 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 they had a system in place of owning land like the Europeans who came over here. That was some kind of, no doubt, that was some kind of backwater deal where they colluded with a few Cherokee Indians who sold out the rest of their people, and they just gave up 17 million acres of land so that a few could become rich and wealthy. And in fact, the Cherokee themselves ended up becoming slave owners, and they had plantations and they owned a lot of our ancestors. And even today, you have some quote unquote black people, African Americans, who are Cherokee Indians. And now, yes, they have intermingled and mixed, and they have Cherokee blood, but a lot of their ancestors were enslaved by the Cherokee because the Cherokee were slave holders. They were what was known as the one of the five civilized tribes. And they got the title of the five civilized tribes because they took on the Europeans way of thinking, style of dress, and their way of conducting themselves in a quote unquote civilized manner. Those were the five civilized tribes, the ones that got on board with the colonists. So our ancestor was from an area that was land taken from the Cherokee, quote unquote, purchased from the Cherokee. It goes on to say that Henderson County lies within the West Kentucky coalfield area. It is also part of the Evansville, Indiana, Kentucky metropolitan statistical area. Now I want you to keep that in mind, because before we even get deeper into the escape story, I want you to see how Henderson County, Kentucky, and Evansville, Indiana is almost connected at the hip, even in this Wikipedia article, because they're right next to each other. And remember, it was slavery in Henderson County, Kentucky, and there was no slavery in Indiana, right across the Ohio River. Okay, so let's get back to the story now that we have some kind of idea of where we are at. All right. Look, the ancestor goes on to say, when Adah was not yet 5 years of age. Whoa. Hold on. Let me back up a little bit. You see here where it says she retains the ancestor Adah. She retains many impressions gained in early childhood of the slave quarters. She remembers the slaves singing and dancing together after the day of toil. Now, for those of you who don't know, um, on most plantations, virtually all of them, but on the really big plantations, you would have what they call the big house. That's where the slave owner and his family live. And then you would have the slave quarters, which were basically a lot of rundown shacks, one room buildings where our ancestors would live. A lot of times they would have bunk beds inside of these what we would call bunk beds inside of these slave quarters. A lot of times they just had pallets on the floor, especially for the children. A lot of times the children would actually have pallets on the floor, or they would lay out makeshift blankets, and they would lay them underneath the bed that the parents would sleep on, and they would sleep on the floor. A lot of them had makeshift fireplaces where they would actually be able to cook their food. Sometimes they would have a table or a chair, but they were really small. They were really poorly furnished. They were poorly built. A lot of times they were built with sticks, mud, some wood, but not the best quality of wood. When it rained, they would leak. And a strong gust of wind could probably knock them over. So this is the living situation of this ancestor when she was a small child, because you see she was born in 1852, so she was indeed born when slavery was still in full swing. The Civil War was still over a decade away. Anyway, it goes on to say, when Adah was not yet 5 years of age, the mistress, Louisa McLean, that's the wife of the slave owner, Louisa McLean, made a trip to the slave quarters to review conditions of the Negroes. It was there she discovered that one little girl there had been developing ideas and ideals. The mother had taught the little one to knit tiny stockings using wheat straws for knitting needles. Now, it was the job of the older women on the plantation to made clothes for the slaves to wear. They made the makeshift blankets. They made the makeshift sheets, the things that they would lay down on their beds. They made the stockings. They made the quote unquote socks. They stitched up hats. They repaired the clothing. Any type of jobs, like they did the cooking, any types of jobs like that, the older women would do them. Now, whenever the slave children were young, before they were giving tasks like actually working in the field or working in the big house, they usually would start doing that around the age of 10 years old. So before that, they would be watched over by these older women who were too old to actually go out into the fields, or too old to do this, too old to do that, and they would take care of the cooking and the cleaning and the sewing of clothes, etc., etc. They would have to watch these young children until they got of age and were able to be sent out into the field. We have another comment. Sandra asks you, good morning, and Pooh. Good morning to you too, Queen. Good morning to you too. Good to have you in the building. Good to see you. Good to see you. And so, even the young boys, we would see them too. Before they were around 10 years old and placed out in the fields, they would just be hanging around the slave quarters with the older women, doing what they wanted them to do, playing, running around, kind of enjoying a normal child's life, or as much of a normal child's life as a someone who enslaved could enjoy. And a lot of times they would pick certain children who were around the same age as the slave owners' children, and they would take them into the house, and they would have them basically become the property of their children. And they would be playmates, but not only would they be playmates, they would be the personal servants to the children of the slave owners, and they would grow up together, right? And it would almost instill in the slave a feeling of connectedness to the children of the slave master. You see this in a lot of the stories. You hear this in a lot of the stories too. They will refer to the slave master's children as their friends, but in the minds of the slave owners, they were property, they were toys, they were pets. This is the sickness of it. So what ended up happening is the wife of the slave master, what they would usually do every now and then, they would make their rounds, and they would go around to the slave quarters. They would, look inside of the houses, basically like doing a shakedown, honestly. But they would be going to see if anybody was sick, if they had the things that they needed, not trying to see if they were okay or doing good, but they were they were property. They were an investment. If the slave got sick, they would get the doctor to try to treat them, to get them well, so they could continue working. If they needed things that would help them continue to work, it was provided for them. So the wife of the slave master, while the man was out tending to whatever business that he had, whatever bit, because he was running a business, whatever business that he was tending to, she would go around, see what everybody was doing, ask questions, try to make sure nobody was trying to escape, basically doing like a head count, make sure everybody is still there, see if anybody has tried to escape. Ask, is everybody doing okay? Do they have this? Do they have that? Is anybody sick? Do anybody need to be taken to the doctor? Etc. 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 And so at one point, Louisa McLean, she goes out to check the slave quarters. She's making her rounds. She sees Adah Isabelle Suggs, the topic of our discussion today. And she sees that she has been taught at the age of 5 to knit tiny stockings using wheat straws as needles. And it was something about her mental acuity where she was like, oh, you know what? She seems like she catches on quickly. She knows how to do some things at the age of 5 years old. Okay, this is the one that I want to snatch up and put inside of the big house to be that companion of my child. This is what they would do. So watch this. Watch as the story goes on. She says Miss McLean at once took charge of the child, took her from her mother, taking her from her mother's care and establishing her room at the residence of the McLean family. Bingo. That's what I was describing. So now she's going to be being raised with the daughter of the McLean family. Boom. Now she's in the big house. She has access to more things than the individuals that are in the slave quarters. She has her status has improved somewhat. And I'm going to show you a little bit later why that may have been the case in addition to her brilliance as a small child. I'm going to show you something a little later which may have helped that decision to bring her into the big house. So be mindful of that. But another thing, when she came into the big house, she didn't get her own bed. She didn't get her own room. A lot of times, like how it's real talk, how an individual would do with a cat or a dog or a pet, they would lay a pallet out at the foot of the bed of the children or in the corner of the child's room. And the ancestor Adah most likely slept on a pallet in the corner of the room or on a pallet on the floor at the foot of the bed of the McLean's family's daughter. Okay, so look, check this out. They go on to say, today, the aged Negro woman recalls the words of praise and encouragement accorded her accomplishments. For the child was apt, active, responsive to influences, and soon learned to fetch any needed volume from the library shelves of the McLean home. Stop. Pause. Wait a minute. She learned to fetch any needed volume from the library shelves of the McLean home. Ask yourself this. How can you go pick out a particular book from the shelf of a library if you do not know how to read? So right there we see evidence that Adah, even as a young child, she learned how to read. Now, it was illegal to teach a child to learn how to read, but in certain instances, the ones in the house Negroes, they were taught how to read. They were either taught how to read by the child that they were watching over, or they were taught how to read by the lady of the house. So it's quite possible that Miss Louisa McLean taught her how to read. Now check this out. This is something interesting I'm going to show you guys. Do we have any evidence outside of what she just said that proves that this young lady actually knew how to read? Because most of our ancestors who were enslaved didn't. Now check this out. I'm going to show you guys something, some more documentation. We're going to get out the story for a second. Now this is the 1870 census, right? The 1870 census. Now the 1870 census is after the end of the Civil War, so all of our people are free. If the ancestor that we're talking about, Adah, she would have been around 18 years old when this particular census was taken. Now, on these censuses, they would record things like the head of the household, the age, the race, because there were white, there were blacks, there were Germans, there were Italians, there were the black people, there were mulattoes, there were different quote unquote races in America at this time. And so these things were documented on these census records. Now, just a point of reference, if you're trying to do your own genealogical research to find out your own roots and your own family history, you need to look into these census records, because it's going to be able to answer a lot of questions for you. But in reference to what we're talking about now, I have here the 1870 census records that has Adah Isabelle Suggs, who we're talking about, on it. Now, on these census records, it also has a section where it talks about the occupation of the individual, where they were born, where their children were born. But it also has, and I don't know if you can actually see this, but look how it's numbered in this column at the top, right? You got 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. If you look hard, 16 and 17 are columns related to education. And it says cannot read and cannot write. So when you're looking at these census records and it says cannot read and cannot write, if those boxes are marked, that means the person could not read and they could not write. Now, the majority of our ancestors who was born in slavery, anytime you see them on these census records, it's always going to be checked that they could not read and they could not write. But if you look at this, this top half of the census that I'm showing on the screen, these are all white people. Okay, these are all white people. Now, if you look in that column 16 and 17, you see it's all blank, because they all went through education. They all were educated. They learned how to read and write. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to scroll down. You see where you start having the marks in that section. That's when you get to the black people, right? This B, the B and the W. These are the section for race. So what we're going to do, we're going to scroll down, and I highlighted it for you to make it a little easier for you to read. You have in this highlighted portion, you have Milton McLean. Okay, you have under that, you have Harriet and you have Adah. Now, Harriet is the wife of Milton McLean, right? Now, a lot of times you take on the name of the slave owner. So she's enslaved to the McLeans. That's why her name was Adah McLean. Her mother was Harriet McLean, and her father's name was Milton McLean. But you see that in the title, she's called Adah Isabelle Suggs because she got married. We're going to get to that. She married a man with the last name Suggs. But right now, as a youth, she's McLean. And so what I want to point out to you guys, the last name on the list is Adah McLean. She's 18. She's a female. And you see in the race portion, it's an M. That's for mulatto. I'm going to explain that in just a second. But if you look over to right where the hand is moving, that's the section that says cannot read and cannot write. You see it's blank next to her name. But next to her mother and father, you see these two dashes, meaning her mother and father could not read and write, but she could read and write. So we have evidence, outside evidence, in addition to the slave narrative or the oral history that we're looking into, that even though she was born a slave, she could what? She could read and write. Why? Because the Lewis McLean, most likely, taught her how to read and write so that she could go get the books from the library. Okay, so that she could go get the books from the library. But I want to point out something else to you guys. Right next to Adah's name, you see Adah, you see her age, 18, you see a F for female, and you see a M for mulatto. What is a mulatto? A mulatto is a person of mixed ancestry. And you see she's a mulatto, her mother's a mulatto, and her father's a mulatto. All of them are mulattoes. All of them are mixed. Either they're mixed with white and black, they're mixed with Indian and black, Indian and white, whatever. Most likely they're mixed with white and black, though. Most mulattoes were mixed with white and black, but the mixture could have been Indian as well. But I'm supposing that she's a mulatto because she's mixed with white, which would have made it easier too for them to decide to bring her into the house, put her in the house with the child because she was mixed anyway, and why it was easier for them to be like, you know what, we don't mind teaching her how to read. She's a mulatto anyway. She has some white blood, and her parents are mulattoes as well. So we just keep that in mind. I want you to pay attention to that. So this ancestor that we're talking about, she was mixed. Her parents were mixed, probably were white, and according to the census record, she could in fact read. And so that makes sense with what we're reading in the oral history, where she soon learned to fetch any needed volume from the library shelves of the McLean home. She could already read before slavery came to an end. Okay, let's continue with the story. Look, she was contented and happy, but the mother knew that much unhappiness was in store for her young daughter if she remained as she was situated. And what they're talking about is the mother of Adah, Miss Harriet, Ancestor Harriet. She knew that her daughter was happy. Of course, they're still treating her like a child. She hasn't got the adult version of slavery yet. And she's in the house. She's playing with the master's children. They taught her how to read. So to her, as opposed to the slaves working out in the fields, she got it good in comparison. But her mother knows, man, listen, if once she gets older, she's going to see that this thing called slavery is not what she thinks it is at such a young age. It's not what she thinks it is. It's a horrible institution. And if she stays as a slave, her happiness will soon be broken and it will be turned to unhappiness. So her mother already knew she has to do something about this. Look what they say. A custom prevailed throughout the southern states that the firstborn of each slave maiden should be the son or daughter of her master, and the girls were forced into maternity at puberty. The mothers naturally resisted this terrible practice, and Harriet was determined to prevent her child being victimized. What are they talking about here? The girls were forced into maternity at puberty. I know a lot of times we've often heard this. We may have seen references made to it in movies, but has it really sunk in what they're describing? They're talking about breeding. These young girls, as soon as they hit puberty, what is that? When their period starts, when they begin to get on their flower. This could be at 10, 11, 12, 13. They could technically still be a baby, a small child through our eyes. But back then, as soon as they hit puberty, they were forced into maternity. They were forced to breed and have children. Why? Because more children meant more slaves, and the quote unquote slave master could increase the amount of slaves that he had without buying them for $500, $600, $700, $1,000. They could just breed the ones that they had. So the mother knows that even though her daughter is somewhat living a better life in the big house than these slaves in the fields, she knows that as soon as she hits puberty, she's going to get a rude awakening and she's going to be victimized. And there's nothing that she, her mother, or her father, or anyone around them will be able to do to stop it. And this was the fate of a lot of our ancestors during this time. It's something that happened. You see that they said that this was a custom that prevailed throughout the southern states. It was a custom. It was something that happened. It happened to all of them. As soon as they hit puberty, they're forced into breeding. Whether they wanted to or not, whether their parents wanted them to or not, there was nothing that they could do to stop it. So her mother, knowing this, her mother wanted to save her. It goes on to say, one planned escape was thwarted. When the girl was about 12 years of age, the mother tried to take her to a place of safety, but they were overtaken on the road to the ferry where they hoped to be put across the Ohio River. They were carried back to the plantation, and the mother was mildly punished and imprisoned in an upstairs room. So the mother tried to help her daughter escape once before at the age of 12, before she made her ultimate escape, of which the topic of this video implies. And so what happened was, we don't have all of the details, but we can see that the mother tried to take the daughter to a ferry, to a boat that would take them across the Ohio River into Indiana, the free state, where her daughter could be free. But they were captured and carried back to the plantation, most likely by someone who was sent off from the plantation or one of the paddy rollers. Remember, the paddy rollers often patrolled at night just for things like this, to catch individuals trying to escape. Now, one could imagine, if you live in a slaveholding state like Kentucky was, and your state, your county, rather, where you live borders the Ohio River, and directly on the other side of the Ohio River is a free state, common sense would tell you that a lot of the people that you have enslaved would be trying to get across that Ohio River once they learned that it's freedom over there. So they no doubt had several patrols lined up along this Ohio River, because this was obviously a thing that they were dealing with. Because how else would the mother know to even try that? Obviously, someone had done it before. Someone had tried it before. This was something that they talked about. Now, if you tried to escape and you were caught, you could be punished severely. You could even be killed. And not only could the mother have been punished, the daughter could have been punished as well. Now, we don't see talk of the daughter being punished, thankfully, but to risk trying to escape was a heavy decision to make, because if you were caught, your situation could be made worse. It's just the fact of, or the act of trying to help her daughter escape, she could have got her daughter beaten brutally. But thankfully that didn't happen. But remember, that they tried to escape by getting a ferry to travel across the Ohio River. Remember that as we go further. So the escape is thwarted, and the mother now is punished by, mildly punished means she was whipped. Okay, she was whipped, probably tied to a tree or tied to a barrel, and she was beaten. Now, I don't know, mildly punished as opposed to being beaten to death and being beaten bloody. That mildly punished by our standards, it was still something that no one alive would want to endure. I guarantee you that. But they're comparing it to, she could have been beaten to death. So since she wasn't beaten to death, and since she wasn't beaten until she was raw, and they had poured salt into her wounds, then it was a mild punishment. Okay, because that's what they would do as well. They would beat until the flesh was hanging off, you were bloody, and then they would rub salt into the wounds. They wanted to be as vicious as possible. And so then the mother, Ancestor Harriet, was imprisoned in an upstairs room inside of the big house somewhere. Makes me think about those Disney movies, right? Where you have like who is it? The girl with the long hair, Rapunzel, or whatever, where the guy came, the hero, Rapunzel, let down your hair so that I may climb the golden stair, right? They lock them away in some tower, okay? So they imprisoned her in some upstairs room, locked her up as further punishment. And again, I'm of the opinion, honestly, that they didn't beat the girl, and they didn't severely beat the mother. For one, they may not have just been into beating. Every slave owner didn't viciously beat their slaves, because one, they were property. But the fact that they were mulattoes, okay, that says a lot. And I'm thinking that they may have been the children, even the mother and her daughter, they were possibly the children of white members of the McLean family. You understand what I'm saying? And so while they didn't necessarily see them as family, they knew that they were the children of the McClain family. So their treatment was somewhat different. But that's just me speculating of what I've read. That's my hypothesis, my educated guess, my informed decision. You can decide for yourself. But the story goes on to say the little girl, Adah, that we're talking about, the little girl knew her mother was imprisoned and often climbed up to a window where the two could talk together. So we have a two-story building. She's locked up upstairs. The daughter would often climb up to the window and talk to her. Crazy. Really make me think about those Disney movies. One night, the mother received directions through a dream in which her escape was planned. She told the child about the dream and instructed her to carry out orders that they might escape together. Now, pause. I want y'all to think about something. I believe this story. How she says that she received directions through a dream. I've had several dreams myself that appear to be alluding to events in real life, either events in the past that I needed clarity on, events in the present that I needed clarity on, or events about the future that I needed forewarning about. But we see this idea a lot that while our ancestors were enslaved, there was a lot of supernatural things that took place to assist them in enduring, overcoming, escaping, and making it to the other side of that horrendous event. So I don't want to just gloss over that. I'm of the opinion that 100% the mother received a dream that guided her into, okay, this is how we're going to do the escape, and this is how the escape is going to work. For one, they really have no need to lie about it. They didn't say that she got a dream about the first time that she tried to have her escape, right? And because the escape plan worked. Obviously, the escape plan worked because we're talking about the escape of Adah, Isabelle, Suggs. Okay? So something happened there. Something happened there. And I believe that she was given some kind of revelation, some kind of dream on how to get her daughter to safety. Bless both of their heart. Anyway, the girl, Adah, brought a large knife from Mrs. McClain's pantry, and by the aid of that tool, the lock was pried from the prison door, and the mother made her way into the open world about midnight. Now think about that. This mother and daughter, they are riding for each other, right? They riding for each other. The mother just get a revelation in the dream. She like, oh man, look, I know how we can escape. She give the plan to her daughter. She like, hey, look, in the dream, this is what they said we ought to do. You already in the house. You got some kind of free, not really free reign in the house, but you got free reign in the house. You can move, you can shake, you can walk around. They done taught you how to read. They trust you. Because even though she tried to escape with her mother, they didn't necessarily blame the child because they didn't beat her. They blamed the mother. They beat the mother and they locked her up and they let the girl back free into the big house. So what the girl does, she go get a knife out the pantry. She sneak it up to her mama through the window. Boom, she slide her the knife and she dip off. She go. And so later on that night, about midnight, the mama used the knife to pick the lock. Imagine that. She used the knife to pick the lock, escape from the room that they got her locked up in, and she dipped off into the quote unquote open world about midnight, meaning she ran off into the wood. Now, what you got to realize is back in those days, things weren't as, how can I put this, developed as they are now. There wasn't a corner store on every corner, so to speak. There wasn't 100 houses on every block, so to speak. Yes, some people had neighbors, but a lot of times you had homes and it would be, you would have to get on your horse and travel to actually go see your neighbor, especially these plantation homes. A lot of these plantations, they had 150, 75 enslaved people on these plantations. Now, these plantations, they had a means of production going on. They had crops, they had fields, right? Where these slaves actually worked. So these houses sat on acres and acres and acres of land. Okay. So there, it wasn't like you could stand in one spot and be able to see everything that was going on the plantation. There was a lot of blind spots and there was a lot of undeveloped land. And so a lot of times our ancestors, when they escaped, they would quote unquote, you'll hear them talking about they will run off into the woods. There were a lot of wooded areas. There were a lot of areas where the trees had not been cut down. There were a lot of swamps. There were a lot of water holes, right? There were a lot of, unnavigable places. There weren't roads everywhere. There weren't highways everywhere. Okay. They would run off into these woods and they would have to navigate these woods to get to freedom. But a lot of times they would just run off into these woods. Sometimes they would find caves in these woods, and sometimes they would hide out in these woods for months. And then sometimes they would even end up going back to the plantation. But sometimes they would literally hide out in these woods for months. And some of the other people who were still enslaved, when nobody was watching, they would take them food. They would sneak food out into the woods and give it to the person who was trying to escape. They did that a lot, especially when they knew they were about to be punished, they were about to be beaten, and they just didn't want to take that lash. They would run off into the woods, be gone for 3-4 weeks, be gone for a month, then come back. Now they'll probably still be beat, but that's just how it happened. So when this mother escaped off into the quote unquote open world about midnight, she ran off into the woods. Now, instead of just running off into the woods, she went there to hide out and wait for her daughter, because the escape plan is for both of them. Now look, check this out. A large tobacco barn became her refuge where she waited for her child. See that? A large tobacco barn. Why is there a large tobacco barn out here? Obviously, because somebody is growing tobacco on their property and they're storing this tobacco in a tobacco barn. But the barns are big. The areas around it are big. There's lofts inside of it. So she went inside this tobacco barn. She hid and she's waiting for a child. Obviously, she already told her that's what she saw in a dream. I'm going to escape. This is where I'm going to go. And then I'm going to wait for you to meet me there. And then we're going to get to freedom. The girl had some trouble making her escape. She had become a useful and necessary member of her mistress's household, and her services were hourly in demand. The daughter, young Mrs. Annie McLean, the daughter of Colonel McLean and his wife Louisa, was afflicted from birth, having a cleft palate and later developing heart dropsy, which made her regular surgery imperative. So think about it. So now we get a little more information. The daughter of the slave owner, she has medical problems, which is all the more reason why they wanted to bring young Adah into the household so she could almost be like a constant companion. For one, to watch the daughter, and if she falls out one day, something goes bad, something happens to her heart, she passes out, she can immediately run and go find somebody to help. But to also tend to her every need, the things that she can't do for herself, tend to her every need. And I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to keep their daughters somewhat like, hidden away. They didn't have regular schools how we have it now. They didn't have colleges, regular colleges like we have it now. They did have schools, they did have colleges, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like it is today. You could educate your children at home, raise them at home, and they never really would have to go anywhere. Okay, they never really would have to go anywhere. But now it makes more sense why Adah is so important to the family, because they have a daughter with severe medical problems that almost needs constant care. Okay, and they didn't want to provide that constant care, so they had Adah provide that constant care, which is another reason why they probably didn't beat her and put her back off into the field, because then they would have to find somebody else to provide the constant care for the young Mrs. Anna McLean. So it's all starting to make sense now. And I would imagine, since they had her getting books from the library and they taught her how to read, she probably would read books to this young girl, like read her stories during the day, at night. Probably was a study mate, all of that. All of that. She probably read bedtime stories to this young girl right here. You see? See, when you look into these stories, see, you read these stories, these oral histories, and you pull out the actuality on the ground. That's what I like to do when I talk about this stuff. I like to paint you guys a picture. So now we're seeing more of the big picture. Anyway, check this out. So the memory of one trip to Louisville is vivid in the mind of the old negress, Anna, today, for she was taken to the city and the party stopped at the Galt House, and I can't really make out what that word is. Looks like the typewriter kind of faulted it out. But they're telling us that the girl had to have several particular surgeries. Now, in order to get these surgeries, she had to go to the city. Remember, I told you, sometimes in these plantations, you miles away from somebody else. So sometimes the doctor would come to you, or you would have to go to the doctor, especially for a specific medical treatment. So in this case, young Mrs. Anna McLean needed specific medical treatment. So on several occasions, they had to take a trip to Louisville, Kentucky, in order to get her the surgery that she needed. Now, whenever the group would leave the plantation and go to Louisville, they would stay at the Galt House. What is the Galt House? The Galt House is a hotel, family. And amazingly, that hotel still exists to this day. Watch this. I want to show you guys something. I like to bring these things into perspective. Now, before we go any further, I want to show you guys. Now, this is the Galt House. Okay. Now, this picture is from 1889. Obviously, this is a later picture than when ancestor Adah went, but this is what it looked like. Okay. Obviously, since slavery was still going on, she had to go sometime probably in the early 1860s, before the Civil War kicked off. And so this is the hotel that the ancestor would have stayed in when they were going to get surgery, the surgeries performed on the young Mrs. Anna McLean. You see? And so look, she says the memory of one trip to Louisville is vivid in the mind of the old negress today, for she was taken to the city and the party stopped at the Galt House and something. It was a grand place, she declares, as she describes the surroundings, the handsome draperies and the winding stairway and other artistic objects seen at the Grand Hotel. Now, in today's world, that's a big building, but we've seen bigger, okay? But that is still a big building. Can you imagine what that hotel looked like to the mind of someone in the 1800s? Awe-inspiring. So this family was wealthy. This family was rich. They owned slaves. They owned property. They could get their daughter the best medical care, the best medical treatment. And this hotel actually exists to this very day. You know what? I'm finna do something. Give me just a second, family. I'm going to the web house. Give me just a second. I'm going to the website of this hotel in Louisville. Okay. Bam. Now, hold on just a second. Let me share my screen. I'm going to show you guys this hotel today. It's still there. Okay. Here we go. Look. Now, this is what it looks like today. bigger and better than ever. Even today, it looks grand. No one can deny that. No one can deny that. And so this is what it looks like today. Look, I believe that's the Ohio River, probably the Ohio River, because they keep talking about that in the story. Look, the Gatehouse, legendary, Louisville, massive, massive hotel. Been around since the 1800s. So whoever owns that got money, and they've been having money. Okay, they've been having money. But let's get back to the presentation. I want to show you guys that. That's the hotel that the ancestor went to. It's still there to this day. Great. Boom. Let's pull this back up. All right. Just showing a little things to verify the ancestor story as we read it. So, like I say, she says that it was a grand place, she declares, as she describes the surroundings, the handsome draperies, and the winding stairway and other artistic objects seen at the Grand Hotel. It was a Grand Hotel then, it's a Grand Hotel now. The child loved her young mistress, and the young mistress desired the good slave should be always near her. So patient waiting was required by the Negro mother before her daughter finally reached their rendezvous. So the mother has escaped. She's hiding out at a tobacco barn, and she's waiting for her daughter to be able to make her escape. But just like I explained to you, they have instilled a love of the ancestor Adah with the child, the young Mrs. Anna McLean. They have instilled a love in her for her because they put them together when Adah was only 5 years old. And so this has been her constant playmate and companion for basically all of her life that she can remember up until this point. And the young mistress, especially since she has these medical problems, this is like her best friend. Not only is it her best friend, it's like her personal pet and play toy, to be honest with you guys. And so she requires her to always be near her because she always needs, oh, help me get dressed, help me do this, make my bed, put my toys away, comb my hair, let's play hide and seek, you do this. Just think about it. Kids like having somebody around anyway that they can boss around. Imagine having somebody around your age. You go, hey, look, we finna play this, we playing this, we doing this, go here, say this, do that, go get a book from the library, read me a book. I want to hear this, I want to do that. Here, help remove my bandages, comb my hair, help me put my dress on, help me put my shoes on, help me put my socks on. So she was always near the daughter, young mistress Anna McLean, which is another reason why I feel like it made her kind of indispensable, and they didn't want to whoop her too bad when her mother tried to have her escape the first time. But we've already explained that. But look, check this out. Under cover of night, the two fugitives traveled the 3 miles to Henderson. So what are they talking about? The two fugitives. So at one point, the daughter saw her opportunity to escape. She was left free momentarily. She left the house, probably at night, ran through the woods, found the tobacco barn where they were supposed to rendezvous at, where they were supposed to meet at. She meet her mother. Now, the mother, Harriet, and the daughter, Adah, they are the two fugitives. Under cover of night, the two fugitives traveled the 3 miles to Henderson. There, they secreted themselves under the house of Miss Margaret Bentley until darkness fell over the world to cover their retreat. Imagine the frightened Negroes stealthily creeping through the woods in constant fear of being recaptured. They had already been recaptured once before. Look at this. Federal soldiers put them across the river at Henderson, and from that point, they cautiously advanced toward Evansville. Now, what are they talking about, federal soldiers? Apparently, at this point, the Civil War is kicking off. Remember, she was born in 1852. The Civil War kicked off in like 1860, 61, 62. This is the height of the Civil War. Now, while the Civil War was going on, slavery was still going on, but individuals, our ancestors, were trying to escape. Now, it had become mandated that any enslaved person, if they could make it to where the federal soldiers were, the federal soldiers or the Union Army, remember, you had the Union versus the Confederacy in the Civil War. Now, Kentucky, it took a while for Kentucky to actually get on board with the Civil War because you had some people in Kentucky who were against slavery. You had some people in Kentucky that were pro-slavery, but eventually Kentucky joined the Confederacy. Okay, but what happened was these federal soldiers who were the Union Army, the Union soldiers, they had a mandate that if any enslaved person could make it to where they were at, boom, you were automatically free. Okay, you were automatically free. You didn't have to go back, and they were not going to allow the Confederates to come take you. At one point, they would return them to the Confederate masters, but at another point, they were like, X-nay, we cutting all that out, especially after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. There was no more turning over the enslaved back to the slave master. So the federal soldiers put them across the river. What river? The Ohio River at Henderson. And from that point, they cautiously advanced toward Evansville. I'm going to show you guys a map. I want you to be able to picture this in your mind. Okay? So look, now check this out. There's a map I got for you guys, and I've circled 3 locations. The top location is Evansville. That's Evansville, Indiana. Okay? The next thing I circled is the Ohio River. Now that whole blue winding river, that's the Ohio River. And the third one I circled is Henderson. That's Henderson County. Okay? That's Henderson County. So from Henderson County, they made it to the federal soldiers. The federal soldiers put them across the Ohio River. And once they crossed the Ohio River, they crossed into Evansville, Indiana, where they were now free, especially because Indiana was a free state. And in Evansville, Indiana, that's where the interview that we're reading is actually taking place. So we see visually the close proximity of these locations, and we can kind of get some kind of idea of the possible path that was taken. But we know they went from Henderson across the Ohio River into Evansville. Okay, that's just so we can follow this in our mind. They go on to say, the husband of Harriet, Milton McLean, and her son Jerome were volunteers in a Negro regiment. What is the Negro regiment? Like I told you guys, when the Civil War kicked off and the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and the Union Army decided to put guns in the hands of the colored people so that they could help them fight the Confederates, they created what they're calling here the Negro Regiment, or the U.S. Colored Soldiers. You can look it up as the U.S. Colored Soldiers. It was a regiment, a battalion of Black African Americans who were fighting alongside the Union Army. Now, this ancestor was telling us that the husband of Harriet, Milton McLean, her father, and the son of Harriet, Jerome, who is the brother of Adah, they were volunteers in the Negro Regiment, meaning that they had found a way to get to the federal soldiers as well, and they decided to fight on behalf of the Union soldiers. Look, the operation of the federal statute providing for the enlistment of slaves made enlisted Negroes free, as well as their wives and children. So, by that statute, Harriet McLean and her daughter should have been given their freedom. So it's like I said, they were technically freeing the slaves, but you had to escape from the slave master in order to experience and enjoy that freedom. So Milton McLean, his son Jerome, they were fighting on behalf of the federal army. So by virtue, they were free, and their wives and children were free as well. But their wives and children had to make it to them to exercise and enjoy that freedom. Now, I want to show you guys another document where you see I said the son Jerome, may his name live on forever and may his memory never die. This again is the 1870 census. Remember, I showed you where we have Milton McLean highlighted here at the bottom. We have Milton McLean, Harriet McLean, Adah McLean, all of the people named in the oral history that we're actually reading about. But we also have on page 2, following that, we have Jerome. You see what it says, Jerome Watson. But that Jerome is the Jerome that's mentioned in the slave narrative. If you look again, he's a mulatto, and this Betty, his wife, is a mulatto as well. Now you may be saying, how could they have? How could one be McLean and how could the other be Watson? Well, depending on who owned you, right? You could be, if you got sold off to another plantation, technically your last name changed. Your last name was the name of whatever plantation you came from. And then in some cases, when individuals got free, they made up whatever name that they wanted. But we know from the documentation that they're all living in the same house. So it's not a coincidence that they're all living together. And we have the Milton, we have the Harriet, we have the Adah, and we also have the Jerome. Now check this out. I'm going to show you guys something. Look at the line that's talking about Jerome Watson. He's a mulatto. Again, the whole family is mulatto. They're all mixed. And if you look over to the section 1617, where it says, can I read and can I write? Now, he's older than Adah, but he can't read, he can't write. See that? Can't read, can't write. But his sister can. Why? Because she was in the house and she learned how to read, because it was important for her to be able to read to that little girl that she was tending to. Okay, let's go further. I just wanted to show you guys that. Now, again, if you're doing your own genealogical research about your own family, those census records, man, find the census records. That's where you're gonna get a lot of good information from. Anyway, when the refugees arrived in Evansville, they were befriended by free Negroes of the area. Harriet obtained a position as maid with the Parveen family. Miss Haley and Miss Genevieve Parveen were real good folks, declares the aged Negro Adah when repeating her story. After working for the Mrs. Parveen for about 2 years, the Negro mother had saved enough money to place her child in pay school. There, she learned rapidly. So they were able to also put Adah in school so that she could further her education. Okay, now check this out. Adah McLean was married to Thomas Suggs January 18th, 1872. Now remember, you look at the title, we're talking about the escape of Adah Isabelle Suggs. Now up until this point, we've been calling her McLean. But now we see she was McLean, but she was married to a man named Thomas Suggs in 1872, hence the name change. Thomas was a slave of Bill McLean, another one of the McLeans, and it is believed he adopted the name Suggs because a Mr. Suggs had befriended him in time of trouble. Of this fact, neither the wife nor daughter have positive proof. The father has departed this life, but Adah Suggs lives on with her memories. Now check this out. I want to show you guys something. We're going to look a little deeper into this thing. Now, this is the 1880 census, 10 years after the 1870 census. And we're going to remember, they said that she was married in 72. So on this document, we should be able to see her husband. And indeed we do. If you look at the bottom portion of this census, you see a name highlighted. You see Thomas Suggs, you see Adah, and you see a daughter named Hattie, right? You see a daughter named Hattie. She named one of her daughters after her mother. Shout out to her for that. And so you see that again, by 1880, just like the oral history says, she was married to this man, Thomas Suggs. Now, what's interesting to note, this first section after their names, where you see a BBB, that's the race. All of them are indicated as being black. Remember, 1870, they already confessed that Adah was a mulatto. But in 1880, they're calling her black. I want you guys to remember something. A lot of times on this census record, they play with the race of our ancestors. That's why sometimes your ancestors may have been mixed. They may have been mixed with white. They may have been mixed with Indian. But you may look at these records and it might just say black or it might just say Negro, right? But if you get enough of the records, you can be like, oh, on this record, it actually says that they were mulatto. And you can get more information. But another thing that I want to show you guys, I want y'all to look all the way into the last corner. Okay, this last two lines is asking you where were you born, and it's asking where your parents were born. I want to show you guys something. When it's talking about these other people that's on this census, because a lot of these people are white, they're asking them where were they born, where were their parents born. Look at this: England, 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 Knight, German, Northumbridge, Britain, I believe, Northumbridge, Vancouver, Switzerland. I'm seeing Switzerland on some of these. Just look at some of these places where these people's parents are from. Immigrated to America after the Civil. This is 1880. This is 1880, and their parents are immigrating to America. Right? But then we see that the ancestor Adah, her quote-unquote American roots run deeper than theirs. We were already here before them. England? Your parents came from England? Her parents came from Kentucky. You see? But they would project that they have more of a right to the land and the country than the descendants of slavery, when a lot of them came even after slavery was over or after our ancestors did. That's just crazy to me. That's just something to think about. I may have to do a whole show on that. But if you look at these census records, you're going to see a lot of these people came late in the game. Now, look, I highlighted another portion on top just to show you guys something. The first name is Jerome. That's one of the sons of Adah. So she named one of her daughters after her mother, Harriet, and she named one of her sons after her brother Jerome. Okay, after her brother Jerome. At the time, he's 5 years old. Okay, moving right along. I just want to show you guys that. Moving right along. Let's get back to the story. Okay, yeah, we finished that. Oh yeah, real quick. You see how it says that the father has departed this I'm on the last sentence. The father, talking about Thomas Suggs, has departed this life, but Adah Suggs lives on with her memories. Meaning, by the time this interview was taken in around 1937, Thomas Suggs had passed away. Okay. Varied experiences have attended her way: wifehood and devotion, motherhood and care. She has known for since she has given 15 children to the world. Adah has had 15 children. Among them were one set of twins, daughters, and triplets, 2 sons and a daughter. She is a beloved mother of those of her children who remain near her, and says she is happy in her belief in God and Christ and hopes for a glorious hereafter where she can serve the Lord Jesus Christ and praise him eternally. What greater hope can be given to the mortal than the hope cherished by Adah Isabelle Suggs? Now, real quick, remember I showed you guys that she named one of her daughters after her mother, Harriet. That daughter is uh man, hold on. I thought that daughter was named in the narrative. Perhaps not. Perhaps not. I may have gotten mixed up. Of this fact, neither the wife nor daughter have positive. Oh yeah. It was at the beginning. Uh, yeah. Look at this first paragraph. They say, among the interesting stories connected with former slaves, one of the most outstanding ones is the life story of Adah Isabelle Suggs. Indeed, her escape from slavery, planned and executed by her anxious mother, Harriet McLean, bears the earmarks of fiction. But the truth of all related occurrences has been established by the aged Negro woman and her daughter, Miss Harriet Holloway, both citizens of Evansville, Indiana. And I just showed you guys on the census, on the 1880 census, the daughter Hattie or Harriet, Hattie. They just shortened it up. But Thomas Suggs, Adah, and Hattie, her daughter. That's the young lady or the ancestor who gave some of this information that we're seeing inside of the slave narrative. And what I want to show y'all real quick. Now, this is the 1900 census. This is from 1900. Remember, she said she had a total of about 15 children. That's also on the census. Look, what's highlighted here. See, we want to prove everything that she said is correct. This is from 1900. Okay, I highlighted Thomas Suggs, the husband, the head of household, the wife Adah. Now look at that second line of the highlighted portion. That's Adah. This is the one that we're talking about. Look, it says Adah, and just go to the right. Wife, go to the right. B, that's saying she's black. F, female. January is basically saying like when she was born. 1852. That's the year she was born. It's kind of faded. She's 48 years old at the time. This M stands for, I'm sorry, the M stands for married. She's been married for 28 years. Now, bam, look, that 15. That's the number of children she's given birth to, 15. And this 8 is the amount that's basically living. That's still living. 8. So again, we have documented proof of the story. We have historical records of the story that she gave birth to 15 children, 8 of which are still alive. So we can see some of the names of her children right here. Okay. And honestly, if we were to follow these children and follow their children and their children's children, we can no doubt find people alive right now today that descended from this ancestor whose story we are reading about. Now, I don't know if her descendants know about this, but if they were to do their genealogical research, they will find some interesting facts about their family. Now, this is from the 1900 census, confirming more of the story. Okay, confirming more of the story, and I also got the 1910 census. I don't think we need that here. I don't think we need that here. Let me see, just a second. Let me get out of this. Yeah, as we bring this to a close, I'm gonna try to check this out. Now, this is the actual headstone of the ancestor that we've been learning about, Adah Suggs. Adah Suggs, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Adah Suggs. The ancestor, one of the ancestors that actually Escape. So today we've been talking about the escape of Adah Isabelle Suggs. We have been allowing the ancestors to speak, and we have been dealing with history, the history of our ancestors, and we have been providing context so that you could follow the story and also understand more about what our ancestors dealt with during that time. So this is the tale about one of our ancestors who escaped from Kentucky, escaped into Indiana, and she lived long enough up until the 1930s where she was able to tell her story. And we have corroborating documentation to prove that what she said was correct and true. Remember, there's always going to be people that try to discredit our oral history and discredit the facts about what our ancestors went through, what they did, and what they were able to achieve. But we have to remember that the reliability of these slave narratives and these oral histories is almost unmatched. And they give us the most profound understanding of what life was like for our ancestors during those times. It's better than what anyone can say today, what any historian can tell us pales in comparison to what our ancestors can tell us themselves. So as usual, I hope you guys enjoyed this tale. I hope you heard something that you never heard before. And if you did hear something that you heard before, I hope I was able to provide more insight into it. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel because this channel is fast becoming the premier location to get a proper historical understanding of what our ancestors went through from the mouth of our ancestors themselves. This your brother Matthew Daniels, aka I'm Pooh, aka the Chosen Few, aka the real bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm world. I am the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. I'm doing the book game like it ain't never been done before, and I'm doing the book game like it'll probably never be done again. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Until next time, peace, shalom, hotep, ashe. I'm out.